I'm Amy, and I'm going to demonstrate priming and setting up a Rituxan infusion. So I have all my supplies here. Now, Rituxan is one of the immunotherapies that comes up from pharmacy just with a bag. It doesn't come up with a chemo bag, but we're going to set the pump and the line up just as if we were doing chemotherapy so that we can continue with the rest of the regimen after that. So first, I'm going to prime my long primary chemo tubing with my saline. And we're going to want to remember to go slow through the pump segment part of the tubing to reduce bubbles. That's going to be irritating if we get too many bubbles in there. So just going to slowly unclamp. And then once that tubing gets through the pump segment, I'll open it up wide till the end. That initial flow reduces the bubbles in that part of the tubing. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this hanging for a moment. And then I'm going to set up my Rituxan tubing. So I have a couple steps to do first. I'm going to put my my EquiShield adapter device here. So I'll open this up and wipe off the hub here with alcohol swab. Okay. And then I'm gonna spike my Rituxan back. So I have here a short chemo tubing set. So it's just like what it would come up, if it did come up from pharmacy, it's the same tubing. So I'm gonna clamp that. And I'm gonna show you a method to back prime. So with this, before I spike, I'm gonna put my EquiShield device in place here. So this is the part that goes on the end of your tubing. Just lure lock that on. All right, so now I'm ready to spike the Rituxan. I'm gonna do that below eye level, at waist level preferred. Now I still have my tubing clamped. I'm gonna go ahead and put this up here. And then I'm gonna attach my EquiShield devices while this is still clamped. So I'll alcohol swab that there. And we're gonna go red to red. We're listening for that click. And then I'm gonna back prime. So what I'm gonna do is unclamp this, and you'll automatically start seeing the chemo flow back. Once I get some in the chamber, the saline will flow back. So once I get that in the chamber, I can hang that back up. So now it's easy to put this in my pump. If I had put the tubing in my pump first, that clamp would have been engaged, so it would not have back primed. All right, with my tubing all in the pump, I'm gonna go ahead and hook up to the patient. So I'm gonna do an alcohol swab here on my PICC line. Gonna flush and check for blood return. I'm gonna pretend that our fake line here has blood return. And then I'll hook up my chemo tubing. All right. And at this point, I'm ready to program my pump. So now I'm going to show you how to program the pump for Rituxan. So I'm going to turn my pump on. Since it takes a little while to turn on, I can use this opportunity to unclamp my tubing, both below the pump and the Rituxan tubing. Since the tubing's in the pump, that's clamped, so it won't be free flowing to the patient. So we'll let it do its little boot up thing here. I'm gonna select new patient, make sure that we're on the oncology infusion section, and now we're ready to go. First, we'll have to prime the line so that your chemotherapy gets to the end of the tubing near the patient. I always set up my flush on the left side and my chemo on the right. We're gonna go ahead and channel select the B, or the chemo. We're gonna do guardrails, IV fluid, and bolus. And we are gonna do, since this is a central line, rate 999. And the volume to prime is always 14 mils. So go ahead and press start and let that prime. Takes a little less time when you go at 999 than if you go a little slower. So it's our opportunity to be patient. So once our pump starts beeping, we'll channel off, and we'll press any button to keep your pump on. And now that we're primed, we're ready to program the Rituxan. So we'll channel select that Rituxan line again, and this time we'll do guardrails, drugs, and go down till we find Rituxan. We're confirming that we're doing milligrams per mil. We're gonna program 700 milligrams in our 250. Now we're gonna start our Rituxan at 50 milligrams per hour. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that in the milligrams per hour. The volume total is gonna be 250. So it'll calculate for you the rate. I always check that against the math that I do on my own. If that looks correct and checks out with what you've done, go ahead and push start. And then I like to clamp here on the flush line below the pump. And then of course, before you leave, make sure you have your chemotherapy stickers in place. Now I'm gonna show you how to change the rate on the Rituxan. So the Rituxan is currently going at 50 milligrams per hour. So we're gonna channel select. We're gonna go to dose here, and we're gonna change that to 100 milligrams per hour. Again, it'll calculate the rate for you. I always check that against the math that I've done on my own. Go ahead and hit start. At this point, we'll continue the process of titrating the Rituxan up per the orders, about every 30 minutes. Once the Rituxan is done, you wanna make sure that you get an air in line alarm on your chemo to make sure that all the Rituxan has gone through. At that point, we will channel off. And now we're gonna program our flush. So we can unclamp this here. We're going to channel select, IV fluids, IV fluid maintenance. I always do the rate, the last infused rate. I would have paid closer attention, I believe it was 37 mils. And we'll flush with 25 mils to clear the line. Go ahead and push start. Make sure we unclamped this here, otherwise we'll get that alarm. So that will flush our line. Once you get the infusion completed alarm, we'll go ahead and channel off. Press the button to keep our pump on, and the Rituxan is complete. And now I'm going to show you how to do the next chemotherapy in a regimen. So we just had our Rituxan finish. In the instance of our EPOC, we would have another chemotherapy following the Rituxan. In that case, we can actually reuse our primary tubing. Since we've flushed after the Rituxan, there's no Rituxan in that line anymore, just the carrier fluid. So I'm going to show you how to take the Rituxan down and put up the next drug in the regimen with the EquiShield device still in place. Now, if we were doing a new chemotherapy with, hours later or what have you, I have my primary fluid and primary chemotherapy tubing that I would reset up just like you normally prime. So we're going to pretend that we're moving right along to the epoch part of our regimen. Rituxan is done. So I am going to take my next chemotherapy out of my bag. I'm going to leave it on my spill pad so I still have my chemo bag available. And I'm going to go ahead and take the Rituxan off the pump. I always like to make sure that it's clamped. And I like to kind of get my tubing in the chemo waste bag, get that started. Now with the EquiShield device, it's a dry disconnect, so there should not be any fluid or anything once I disconnect here. I'm going to push down on this tab and pull straight off, and then this will go in my chemotherapy waste bag. And now my line is all ready to hook up my next chemotherapy. So I have that here. It's pre-primed from pharmacy with my EquiShield device already intact. So what I'm going to do is hang this up. And my point of connection is below waist level. So I'm going to alcohol swab here before I connect. And again, we're going to go red to red. You should kind of hear that snap. And then I can go ahead and put my tubing in my pump. At this point, it's always good to remember to put your chemotherapy stickers in place. It's easy to forget that stuff. We want to put one above the pump on your chemotherapy line, one above the pump on the flush line, and then one right at the end of the line before the patient here. That's just to alert everyone visually that this is a chemotherapy line. At this point, I'm going to clamp here, and since my tubing is in the pump, it will not free flow, so I'm going to go ahead and unroll this clamp here. At this point, we're ready to program the pump. So now I'm going to show you how to program for doxorubicin. Again, I have the flush or carrier fluid on the left and the chemo on the right. We're going to go ahead and channel select. And we're going to go ahead and prime. So we're going to do IV fluids, bolus. And since this is a PICC line, I'm going to go ahead and do my rate as 999. And then the volume, we always do 14 to prime. So go ahead and push start. Again, just make sure that your rollers are unclamped. We've got some air in our line. Let's do a little troubleshoot here. I'm going to clamp below the pump. Let's see what's happening here. I think the best way is to just back prime from our saline. So we can do just what we did with the Rituxan. We'll want to unclamp this. Now remember, we're clamped here below the pump. Just going to get this air out here. All right. Go ahead and put my tubing back on the pump. Clamp that again. And I don't see any air in that line, so we should be good to go. Okay. Now I'll unclamp here below the pump and we'll hit restart to finish out that priming. So once you get that infusion complete alarm, you'll go ahead and channel off. Press any button to keep your pump from powering down. And now we're ready to program the chemo. So we'll channel select on the right on the chemo line, go to our guardrails drugs, and we'll go to doxorubicin. Now I'm going to pretend we're doing our EPOC, so I'm going to do the mixed bag version with the etoposide and the vincristine. We're going to select non-weight-based dosing. It's giving you an advisory that this is a vesicant. You can go ahead and confirm that. We are using a central line. It's asking for the drug amount. In this case, it goes based on the doxorubicin. So I'll go ahead and enter that with our volume. And it's giving me a soft guardrails limit, which I can go ahead and override. We'll confirm that the rate here matches the rate from pharmacy. If it doesn't, we can always adjust our volume or our rate accordingly. Go ahead and hit start. All right. Now that it's done and you're getting that air in the line alarm, we'll go ahead and channel off our doxorubicin mixed bag. Press the button to keep our pump on. Now we're going to go ahead and program our flush. So we'll channel select here, guardrails, IV fluids, maintenance. And I always like to go, if possible, the rate that the chemo is running. We'll do 25 for our flush volume. Go ahead and hit start, and we're going to make sure that I unclamp here below the pump so that our flush bag is running. Once the flush is completed and you're getting that infusion complete alarm, you can go ahead and channel off your pump and then disconnect your chemotherapy.